Thank you to all the interesting presentations we have seen so far. And for this panel, I assume that most of the audience are academic researchers and students. So I'll try to ask questions that may be of like relevance to sort of us to understand like how AI is done in the industry. And also, like I think we all share the vision and goals that the research we do should be relevant for industry. So I hope that we can actually like discuss like and get some concrete examples of what have worked well. And just like finally, I remind to the audience that it is possible to ask questions in the chat to all either a specific person or like the entire panel. So like my first question is sort of a follow-up to what you all four touched up on, was basically like how to commercialize research. And my question that I had written down was like, what do you do from a paper to something that you can actually earn money on? But nobody of you actually mentioned anything about research papers. So maybe I can ask Torge first to like a follow-up. You mentioned something that about the deliverables that you would see from academia, like a proof of concept. But so what's the task after you get one of these ideal deliverables? What do you need to do as a company to actually make this to a commercial product?
Yes, for sure. Well, it depends on the type of deliverable. I think Jens spoke a little to how actors like Norse would be closer to delivering working systems than sort of pure, more the university type of actors, which might be more inclined to deliver a report. But I think there needs to be a plan there, and it can be an early stage, like you will want to find out if something is a viable course of action, and then have academia provide the first proof of concept, and then you would proceed with sort of implementing that in a production setting, and then getting value out of that. Or you can ask for a model which fits in a certain framework, and then you can ensure that that model fits into the framework you are using for productionizing internally already. So I guess the answer is that it would depend heavily on the type of deliverable.
Yeah, thank you. So since you mentioned Signal, so what is a typical delivery then from Syntef in this industry collaborations? Is it code? Is it a report? Is it like measurements, or what do you deliver?
There's a huge range. But I would say typically when we're working closely with industry, the delivery is a piece of code. It's not necessarily what we call a program. It's not necessarily something that works on its own, but it's something that plugs into an existing system. And yes, that requires a significant effort in terms of discussing how do we do input, how do we do output, how do we handle. I'm not a programmer. I can program things up to a don't touch it, it's working level. But I know now how to communicate what is my code doing, what is the needs of my code, what does it need to slot in, and then having partners in the project, either from the industry or from internal incentives that actually know something about programming is a huge help. Then we can go backwards. The more research oriented our projects become, the more towards reports and scientific papers, of course, the deliveries they go. But there's often, when we're working closely with companies, there's often a coding component that has to talk with other systems.
And then Jens, when you receive this deliverable from Syntef, so what do you as a community do with it? Is it production ready, or is there like a significant amount of effort that goes into sort of product commercializing?
So I would say that first of all, we have reasonable low expectations for how the solution looks like. I mean, how let's say the polish. The importance is that it works. So when we receive a product from Syntef or Norsk Regnsentral or Simula, we need to collaborate internally with the people in our company, which have the responsibility to implement this and present this to the users. But we also very early need to involve users because they also steer how they would want to interact with the solution. So I think there's usually when we are talking about commercialization of research, there's two elements, and that is to fail fast if we are to fail. And the second is to involve users as quickly as possible.
Great. So Ola, so I'm actually going to ask you something you didn't touch upon in your presentation. So how was GraphCore started? Was this the spin-off from like a research group, or and what have you used your 800 million in funding for?
So it was actually spun out of another company called Exmos. So that was the start. And the answer to have we used up all the millions? No, we haven't. But obviously doing silicon design and doing platform design and platform products that cost a fair amount of dollars. So going back to I think how can we working with the academia, I think, if you look at the applied use of AI over the last past 10 years, it started with really simple models. And over the past, I would say 2 to 3 years, what we really have seen is an explosion in complexity and also size of the models. Today, you have NLP models like GPT-3, and that requires lots of compute capacity, and they have really been developed on legacy models, which is, I don't think is really sustainable from an energy perspective. So I think there is clearly a need to, if you want to advance the art of the fundamentals in machine intelligence, there needs to also be ground research on the models itself to make them more to sparsify them, to make them more efficient. Both from a time perspective, but also from an energy perspective. So that is actually one of the, one project that we have with similar and also the Euro HPC is the Sparsity program, which is a consortium of European universities and research centers, in which is actually looking at that, how to sparsify and make complex models more efficient to compute.
Yeah, and if any of the panelists have a comment or a follow-up question to the others, just feel free to either raise your voice or your hand in Zoom. So you, also, Ola, you mentioned that you had several research projects with academics. So my understanding was that they use your IPU for their research. So what do you get out of these research collaborations?
Obviously, I would say it's twofold or threefold. We talked about new advances in models. But and the other thing is obviously also getting more people to use our technology, because the reality, right, is that when people develop and use and deploy new computing paradigms, they use what is available. So making our technology accessible to people in academia, that is an important thing.
Yep. So that's very interesting. So I'm also wondering, like, how can we, as sort of researchers, and maybe especially the PhD and master students, how can they do research that is relevant to industry? So maybe you think, do you have any opinions about that?
I do on multiple levels, because as was mentioned, there's of course all this on how do we develop models that are actually efficient enough that they can be deployed real life. A lot of the very good models at the moment, they come from what I usually refer to as internet data. It's either language or images, where you have huge resources of training data. And even though some of the problems are complex, they're not nearly as complex as whatever problems you're trying to address if you want to address climate change or real life. So one thing is we need more efficient models. The other thing is that a lot of the models, when they have been developed on this almost perfect data set, they don't work when you have less data. They don't work when you have issues with your data. And some of the things are really just practical things that if you have gaps in your data, the models, the frameworks, they don't work. So there's a lot of thinking about what is actually happening with industrial data. How do you get things to work? And then another aspect is time series. A lot of industrial data is not snapshots, it's time series. There's temporal dependence. And while recurrent models might take some of that into account, it's definitely a field that deserves more attention. And then I would think in the end, I would think that as a student, don't be afraid to go deep into problems, and don't be afraid to work with the domain experts. You don't have to become a domain expert on everything, but don't be afraid of learning from the domain experts either, and seeing the problems from their side.
Yep. And Tori, I know that you have had several students working at KSAT, including one that we are co-supervising together. So what's your experience? Like, how do you engage the students that are doing projects in collaboration with KSAT?
They usually don't need much engaging. They're very optimistic. So I think it should often fall to the industry partner to take a lead on designing the problem, like defining the problem. We are the domain experts at the offset. We have sort of a monopoly on the domain knowledge. So there are lots of things we even take for granted that are not obvious. So we need to be very hands-on with the problem definition, and then to be very hands-off with the solutions. So it goes, I guess, in the same way as Sigma says that they need full freedom and autonomy in the choice of solution.
Yeah, and Jens, you mentioned that you have some open source code and open access data. Is that like a strategy for engaging students and getting them interested in doing projects with you, or how do you go ahead doing that?
Well, it's not I would say a strategy only directed towards academia, but in general that opening up code and solutions will give us a positive increase in or that solutions will come easier. So the solutions will also mature. So I think it's the philosophy is that it's much better to open up than have it closed down. I would want to also go a bit back to what Signe said in her presentation, because she had a slide where she said that 80% of all AI projects fail. And for someone that would have go to the people in the lead of research in Equinor and say that, well, I have 10 projects, but I will only promise that 2 of them will succeed. I think they will not be too happy. So I think one of the challenges we have is to try to increase this percentage. Mm. And I would probably also want to comment on the importance of let's say when a student let's say comes to a problem, and I agree with Signe that they don't need to have domain expertise, but they definitely should have or try to get a domain knowledge. That is important. The second is that they should also understand the data, and not at least, which probably is even more important, to understand the challenge.
Yeah, and then maybe like the follow-up question then to you, Jens, is how to do this. I guess you have some experience in several SFIs. So do you want to say something about how you collaborate with
yes, it's important to engage the users, and actually that is because it's the users who are the domain experts, and that is actually a challenge within Equinor, since we are downsizing the number of people, and since we did a reorganization in last summer, I myself have been struggling to try to obtain the right people into the research projects which are under my task. But I'm not giving this up. I hope that will solve, because what we need to do when we engage ourselves is to also engage the domain experts, because they are the ones that are able to define the challenge. They know also where the data is, and they can also answer the people so that the domain knowledge can be built up.
Yeah, and Torgeir, do you do something similar at KSAT?
In regards to recruitment?
Yeah, or how do you engage your domain expert in research collaboration projects?
Sure. So that's it's not an easy task. Definitely, they need a seat at the table, I would say, and getting people together usually is the first step and the most important step to get a shared view of the challenge, to get a shared understanding of the data. I think there's really no substitute for actually getting those into the room. And I guess what's implied in the question is that we, in the more the development part of it, we're not necessarily the most expert in the domain, actually. So there's bridging that gap as well. So we have to maybe ensure that we're not the only ones interfacing with researchers.
Yeah. And Signe, how do you, as researcher from sort of a research institute, how do you network with industry? Do you have any tips for us in the university?
Now, the advantage of working at SINTEF is that we are well known and people come to us with their challenges. One thing is that we are a little critical of where we do machine learning projects, and that is an attempt to try and lower those 80% of failing projects. I'm not afraid to send industry partners elsewhere in SINTEF if I think somebody else has a better solution. In terms of engaging, we're engaging both with the industry partners, but we also have students. We have quite a lot of students in SINTEF working on projects. And some of the most successful projects are the ones where the students are working on a specific aspect of an industry partner project, because they really get to see the actual application of their research. And I see that there's a question in the chat about whether it's hard to find the right people. Yes, it's super hard to find the right people because our criteria are challenging. We want people who are good at physical systems, good at math, good at statistics, good at programming. And if they, on top of that, actually also know something about deep learning or machine learning, or it's basically impossible to get everything. So really what we're looking for normally is good analytical skills, the ability to learn difficult things at least some pace, and to be able to focus on specific problems.
Yep. And do you have any opinions about, as is asked in the chat, like how should academia prioritize education and research to ensure that we have the talent pool necessary to develop or maintain a vibrant AI community? You are muted.
Yeah, I am. Well, you know, I think as Signe just referred to, you know, finding. I mean, if you look at the people, I mean, the ideal person that you may want to hire, that doesn't exist. So you're really back into finding you know, people with some good analytical and good engineering skills. And that is really also eager to learn. To us, I think to us there is probably a less emphasis on the data scientist part. I would presume that is probably more of an importance to the other people in the panel, and to us it's more an emphasis on you know, machine learning, programming skills, and computer science skills. But in terms of, I think I mean, we have been working a little bit with NTNU, and also a little bit with the UIO in Oslo, and I think the level of you know, the classes being taught, and the level of the student, I mean the level where the students are at when they come out is actually quite high.
So why did Graphcore, if I understood it correctly, like they have quite a significant presence in Norway? So why Norway for a UK company?
Yeah, that's a good I mean, to some extent it goes back to Norse data. So the Graphcore organization in Norway, that was actually spun out of a set of people that came from has origin back at Norse Data, Dolphin, Sun Microsystems, and also Oracle. We spun out a company couple of years back, intending to build really a scale-out platform for AI, and our expertise were high-performance computing and you know, distributed systems and interconnects. And we quickly got in touch with Graphcore, and then realized that we had a shared vision, and that was really the incarnation of the Graphcore Norway presence. It's
Yep. And you mentioned that the coding skills are quite important. So another question that someone has asked in the chat is like, how is your ideal candidate for a scientist / machine learning engineer at your company?
Yeah, it's please come with everything. Like I think the other participants have mentioned, but that's really hard. I would just encourage people to do what they find interesting, but really also to those taking a degree to take programming seriously. So even though it's been only 10 years since I started my education and went through the first years, I know that the focus on programming, even with the physics and statistics programs, has increased and professionalized greatly, so that those coming out there now at least have the option to choose a lot more of the informatics courses. But I'll be honest, if I'm evaluating a new candidate, I will look for the computer science and informatics courses, and not least checking how interested was this candidate in that. If you go through 5 years now and you only have the minimum required courses, then maybe industry isn't the right place for you, basically, because that's all we do there. So there's also that part, but definitely unrealistic to look for everything. And I wanted to emphasize that we are also looking for the analytical mindset and interested people.
Jens, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I would also want to answer Juan's questions A and B on the chat. And when it comes to how young researchers can get involved in industrial collaborations, I would say that yes, experience is in some ways important, but I think competence is just as important. So I don't see that let's say age or experience should be any problem here. The second question, how is your ideal candidate for a data scientist, machine learning engineer? In Equinor, because of our digital journey, we see that we suddenly have an unbalance in our company. We have a lot more geo people than we probably need, and we have way too few data scientists, deep learning specialists, and so on that we have. And we see that our projects are fighting like cats and dogs over these resources. So I think the ideal candidate would be someone that would be ready to join Equinor.
Yep. So how about you, Signe? What do you think the ideal candidate looking for a job should do? How much coding, how much machine learning or deep learning expertise?
We're mainly looking for the analytical skills and the willingness and ability to learn new things on the fly. But you do need some programming, because otherwise you can't deliver anything to the partners, and you do need math and statistics, because otherwise you can't understand the data or the existing models. And if you on top of that know something on machine learning and deep learning, and of course, if you have industrial experience on top of that, it would be perfect. But now we're like dreaming beyond everything. One thing I may add is also that there's this question of how young researchers can get involved in industrial collaborations. And there I think my primary advice would be to check if your institution is already involved in the SFI, in ASFI, as was also mentioned earlier, that they are centers for research-based innovation, meaning that they are usually virtual centers of partners, both from industry and academia, going together to try and solve a range of problems. And there, usually, if your organization is already involved, and most universities are involved in some, there will be plenty of industrial problems to work on, and the partners will usually be very happy to let you in on the ongoing activities.
Yeah, Torgeir.
Yeah, so Freya followed up with sort of pointing out that it is case dependent. So that's actually a great point. So there's a huge difference between a data engineer, a machine learning engineer, and a data scientist. And I think one of the key skills for data scientists is actually communication, because you will need to often communicate this to stakeholders in the business and possibly also to external customers. While a data engineer and machine learning engineer is usually dealing mostly with technical staff within the company. So maybe that's the recommendation for people coming from academia. If you're not aware of these different terms, like what's the data scientist relative to data engineer, you should probably just read up on that. There's lots of resources online, and then you can see sort of how the industry standard for separating it out. So you can sort of aim for the position which would fit you the best. And I think we are all in the same boat as Equinor, that we can't be too picky. So you don't need to be an expert to get a job in this field, basically. If sorry if I misunderstood your comment there. Yes.
Oh, that was correct.
So at UiT, we just started a 5-year integrated master study in AI. So now we basically have an opportunity to sort of like form this study. So any advice that you would give to this study program? Anything we should prioritize, like not just necessarily like the balance between coding and machine learning, but other things that would be useful for these new students to learn and be involved in. So do you want to go first, Ola?
Can you rephrase the question?
So we have just started a 5-year civil engineer study in AI here in Tromsø. So I think, so is there anything special that we should think about in that study program that you think would be useful from an industry perspective? Not necessarily just like they should have these and these courses, but that we should like somehow engage industry, like they spend internships there or whatever, these kind of things.
Yeah, I think again, we do. I mean, we do offer. I mean, our company we offer internships, so we are very interested to have a collaboration on that side. In terms of the general program, I think I would. I mean, again, emphasize more like the general computer science, general programming skills as part of an AI specific master study. I think that is, I mean, you need to understand how to apply the models and the math. That is essential. And what we often see is that people coming from a pure math background with less programming skills. I mean, that is, they need to learn the programming skills on the job, so to say. So yeah, definitely. I mean, we are open to internships and on the so feel free to reach out on that side.
And are these internships as summer job, like a summer job, or
it's actually both. We have summer jobs, but also longer term engagements, and we also engage on the master. I mean, specific master projects and PhD projects. We have a couple of master students and a couple of PhD.
Yep, I think that's a great opportunity. So Jens, do you have any advice for our new study program?
I would probably recommend to try to include use cases from the industry. Maybe even try to include them as exercises or projects. That could also make them, in a way, aware of what problems are out there, and so that I think that would also work great as a motivation during their education.
And are you thinking of like small use cases, like a small part of a course, or like master student projects, or both?
Well, I was thinking of ask the industry, ask companies which have specific challenges, and maybe they've already solved them. Maybe the students then can see how they were solved, and maybe also try to find out other ways to solve them.
Yeah, Signe?
I would also like to add that one thing that I see as a major difference between AI and more traditional educations is that the field of AI is developing much faster. It's probably true in other fields as well, but AI is developing at a very rapid pace. So the students, they have to learn. They have to be aware that what they know might be obsolete already when they leave university. So there's something about learning to process new knowledge that is even more crucial for AI than for many other subjects.
Yeah. So Torgeir, do you have any advice to the new study program?
Well, first of all, I was very positive when I heard that you were setting up such a program, which was in fact a collaboration between informatics and physics department, if I don't misrecall. Elaborating a bit on what the others said, don't only teach the model-centric approach, which has been common to academia. Also look into data-centric AI. So what does that mean? It means that there's a traditional view where in academia, if your model was not performing as you wanted, you would change the model. While in industry, in the same situation, you would usually want to improve on your data. And I think exposing students to some real data sets is a great idea, because then you will also have some of the real problems and some of the data wrangling challenges. Just make sure that they have a lot more time for those projects than the assignments with the polished data sets.
So I guess that's like an interesting question or a challenge for us, like in academia, like teach ML ops in our curriculum when we don't really do that much ML ops in academia. So how can we approach that? Anyone who has a suggestion? So I guess I'm asking, so how can we, if you think not of just the students and PhD students that may be the most interesting people for industry, but us professors, like how can we get to know industry more? Like how do we get in touch with you guys and find problems to work on? So maybe Signe, who has the most experience, like what advice would you give to the university professor?
Reach out. I think that's the first one. Don't be shy to reach out, because in many cases what we see is that there are relevant problems, and we all have problems with too few hands on. So I'm sure there will be something worth sharing. So the first one is reach out, and I guess the second one is join collaborations, apply for projects together, apply for small parts of funding for actual collaboration, get hands on the data.
But how do I reach out? Where do I reach out to? So where do you find? Like, do you just send a cold email, or is there some events or things that we should be more aware of?
Yes, I mean, feel free to send emails. If you're afraid of drowning, then there are, I would say, at least a number of more industrially oriented workshops on artificial intelligence each year. Also in Norway, participate in those, meet with people. There will be relevant problems and solutions described there that will give you an idea of who to approach. And of course, that's much easier when it's physical than when it's virtual. But even virtually, I think is better than nothing.
And yes, I assume that many people must contact Equinare looking for money or other things. So what's your advice, though, if I were to reach out and want to do a collaboration with Equinare? What should I do and not do?
Yeah, I think the best starting point would be the SFIs, because through the SFIs we've already raised a lot of challenges. So and also you have the contact people at Tromsø, at University of Oslo. So it's I would recommend that would be a good starting point. They would also probably know or have connections to the industry partners and know who to contact and try to arrange either a short meeting to discuss something. I think that would be the best way to do it, because if they send a mail to equinor@equinor.com, I think it will be lost.
And the second industry partner in visual intelligence, Torgeir, do you agree? You're a bit smaller company, so would I have a hope to actually get in touch with you if I send to case at info@case.no?
Yeah, so it doesn't scale, unfortunately. So we are being smaller, we get fewer requests, but we have fewer people to handle them. So I think the fate would be much of the same. I would definitely suggest these workshops, and even these which are sort of more research oriented, because then the industry partner has already shown an interest for the research, and you get to, at least when we can meet physically again, it will be easier to talk, and you always have sort of the FaceTime and it's a bit less stressful being at these events. You can have a longer chat and get to know people more than through just a cold email.
Yep. And Ola, I noticed that in your presentation you had a link to something with academia. So what should I do if I want to start collaborating with Graphcore? You're muted.
So at our website, we actually have, there is a link to, I mean, if you go under developer, there is a link to a Graphcore academic program. And you can just, you know, fill in the formula, and then we will get back to you. Same thing for the students program and for the internships. There is also a web pointer and an email address in which you just apply to. I'll post the information in the chat.
Yep. And what kind of research collaborations are you looking for?
I think we are pretty much open. I think we are looking at, I mean, some of the, you know, some of the things that fits into our, you know, research priorities. That goes back into new and efficient ways for doing deep learnings and graph neural networks. Applied use cases for AI that is using the IPU technology. So we have also cloud program, so there is an opportunity for people to actually test and use the IPU in the cloud at no cost. But also, you know, general research programs that goes on for longer, for multiple years. that could be anything from PhD programs to actual, I don't think we have engaged or been involved in as SFIs, but we have certainly been involved with other research programs.
Now I see that we have a question that I really like in the chat, and this is also like we have 5 more minutes of the panel, so if you want to ask some last questions, feel free to post in the chat. So about the startups, that's something both me and also Nora is working basically to build a culture for entrepreneurship. So do you have any visions or suggestions or comments about that, Ola? So what kind of culture do we need in Norway in order to get a unicorn as GraphCore here?
I think generally, one of the big strong points about Norway is that, and Europe in general, is that digitalization of data, both corporate data, but also public data, that has come a long way. And AI at the end of the day is really about doing. It requires a lot of data, and so that is more like a natural. I mean, we have in Equinor here, which have a lot of data from their field. In the public sector, we have a lot of data, from. I mean, we have health record. I mean, the cancer records are back from the 50s, right? So I think there is. So that is really a stronghold for Norway, I think.
Yes, Jens.
I would very much want to point out that Equinor has a very strong interest of supporting new business. We have Equinor Ventures that provide venture capital, which is a project-based funding. So if any smart heads want to start something new, I would definitely recommend them to contact Equinor Ventures to pose their idea and try to get some engagement and support.
So do you also work with startups? Like in your
yes,
sort of
we do, because we also have had several startups that have been supported by Equinor Ventures. And we have also then been asked to support them, either with mostly with the data, but also expertise.
Yep. And how about you, Signe? So do you see any opportunities for great startups with the data that's available in Norway?
Absolutely. Not all. There's a lot of good people coming out. There's a lot of good people being educated now. Not all of them want to be researchers. Some have great ideas that don't fit with existing companies. And since it's the same as Equinor, we're also supporting startups in many different ways. So absolutely, I see a big potential there.
How about you, Torgeir? Any opportunities for startups in Tromsø working with satellite image data? Or some other field, or some other data?
Yeah, definitely for the other data. I mean, satellite data as well, obviously. But I think we both know about some cases using other data. And I'm not really sure that the domain is the most important factor. Like, if you are enthusiastic about machine learning, you can likely work with different domains, and maybe your preference is more sort of imagery versus time series versus graphs. Then perhaps this image was taken by a satellite in space, or by a grandmother of her grandchildren, etc. I don't think that the final distinction there is too big. So regarding Robert's other part of the question is about recruitment again. And I think people will sort of filter to all of these areas. Some will be more inclined to go to the big known companies. Some will go to the startups, and there's also going to be a class of newer but big companies, I think, including Graphcore, which is very well funded from the offset, and they start with a huge scale in mind. And there's all permutations and combinations there. And I think we will all have to work hard in the competition for talent.
Yeah, I see that we have actually run out of time, but maybe you have like time for a quick round of like final remarks. So Torgeir, do you have any closing remarks briefly?
No, not beyond thanking for the organizers for getting to have this super interesting talk with interesting co-panelists, and for you, Lars, for shepherding us through it.
How about you, Ola? Any closing remarks?
No, again, I think I'd just like to thank the organizer for inviting me to this, and also like to thank the other co-panelists. A lot of interesting presentations and good thoughts, and for the few people on the call or on the Zoom, feel free to reach out if there is if you want to get in touch with us.
Yep, Signe?
Yeah, much the same. Thank you very much to everyone on the panel, and to the organizers of the conference, and to Noah. And I think also I'm looking very much forward, after all this interesting discussion and this this positiveness towards collaborating between industry and academia, I'm looking forward to the continuation of the launch of the Noah Industrial Network, which will be an arena for exactly this.
And Jens?
I would just say that it's been a great initiative from Noora and the NLDL conference. So thank you very much for having me. And maybe this could be something which could be repeated more than yearly, because I think it has been welcome to have these discussions. So
yeah,
thank you.
Totally agree.